Hey guys, here's a clip from the Dr. Cliff Show where we're talking about noise reduction. Let me know what you think. But another thing in terms of digital features that allows us to manipulate sound is this idea of noise reduction. So when we think of noise reduction, I think a lot of people think of it as like the Bose headphones thing where they're taking and reducing that outside sound with canceling it out just like we would use for feedback with hearing aids. But hearing aids can't just take and identify the outside sound and get rid of all of it, because what do we want to do still?
We still want to hear.
We still
hear
want
what's
to
going on
speak.
around us. Yeah.
Right? We want to hear what people are saying, so we can't just cancel everything out. So I don't think people realize how easy Bose and Apple have it when it comes to just getting rid of all the other stuff you don't want to hear. So with hearing aids, we have to do something called noise reduction. And so when we're talking about noise reduction, the hearing aids can actually identify what the steady state sounds are. Think of fan noise, think of driving on the road with the steady state road noise. And it has a very distinct acoustic, measure that the hearing aid can pick up on. But when someone starts talking, there's a lot of peaks and valleys in their speech, and so the hearing aid can differentiate between the two. And so what they'll do is they'll identify, okay, which channels that we're measuring this sound in, which channels have the noise and which channels have both speech and noise, and it will reduce the amplification given to the channels that have only that steady state noise.
Right.
And it works really well for comfort, but it's not really necessarily the best thing. It won't give you better speech necessarily.
Right. There's definitely the possibility rather that with these devices where they're at currently, and they're definitely getting better every single day, there is the potential that some of the noise that pops in across those frequency bands may be including some of those speech components. Not always. They've gotten much more specific, but that is where I generally see the higher amounts of noise reduction that we do program into a hearing aid does have the potential to take away some of the softer speech components that could make speech clarity better. So it's definitely a blessing and a curse all in one.
Yeah, and you really have to play that balancing game, right? And so anytime I do, someone is like, no, the noise, it's like, okay, I can increase that noise reduction, and I'm happy to do that if you notice that people, especially who are soft-spoken, become harder to hear, or if you notice that, you start to feel kind of closed off from the world, let me know, because that means we've gone too far. So I always like to give, the example of what you may experience if this fix too much. They might not ever experience it, but at least then they know what's happening. Because again, I don't expect people to become, hearing aid experts, sound engineers overnight. So, I view it as my job to, tell someone this is what you might experience. And if you do, we're just going to make another simple change.
Yeah, and and again, some hearing aids have the ability to do that. Other ones do not. And I feel like we could have an entire episode talking about the approaches that we would take to help someone hear better in background noise. But there are so many different digital features that have been created specifically for the purpose of hearing better in background noise. Now, one thing that we actually talked about before, so anytime someone's looking to hear better in noise, we have to do certain measures inside of the clinic to find out even what their ability to hear in noise would be. And if you guys have missed that episode where we talked about the different things, different pieces of technological equipment that we use inside of the office to measure the ability to separate speech from noise, something that we talked about was the QuickSyn testing, so speech and noise testing. We'll be able to identify how well someone does at separating speech from the noise, and then we have to make accommodations for that on the treatment side.
Right.
And fortunately, with technology, this ability to do this wireless transmission of sound, assistive listening devices have become much more heavily utilized.
Yeah, it's very, very new in the hearing aid space. And it's crazy to think that it's new in the hearing aid space because everybody has Bluetooth-enabled hearing aids now. Kind of if you want to or if you don't want to. There's very few makes or models on the market these days, and most of the time it's just dependent on the size of the actual device. But as long as the size is big enough, nearly any hearing aid on the market can have Bluetooth enabled now, which has opened up a huge door to being able to use assistive listening devices and background noise, but also being able to connect to phones and to media devices, to make phone calls for work, laptop, Zoom calls, app controls on your phone. Bluetooth was crazy, is crazy, continues to be crazy.
And assistive listening devices like remote microphones and things like that, they do give you an improvement in speech intelligibility and background noise, and there's a reason why.
Well, so the reason why that these assistive listening devices give you such a better understanding of people's speech in background noise is because now you actually just have their voice going directly into a tiny microphone that is sitting on their shirt, much like my microphone is here for the camera, right? And that's a very short distance. There's not a lot of time for the rest of the, the restaurant background noise to work its way in to degrade my speech. There's no distance that's also making my voice quieter by the time it hits somebody's voice. So really, you're listening to me as if I'm just talking directly into your ears, rather than through all of that noise, through all of that stuff. And if you do not have a great ability to understand in background noise, like when we do that Quicksin testing, those kinds of devices can quite literally be the difference between you enjoying dinner with your family and having to stay at home because you cannot physically interact with someone in a restaurant.
And this is a really huge thing, because if you've taken someone through an ideal fitting, right, you've measured, you know what their ability to hear in noise is, you've optimized everything you can on the hearing aid itself to help them hear better in background noise, and they're still not happy, the only other thing that you can do is get them into an assistive listening device, and then 9.9 times out of 10, the assistive listening device fixes the problem entirely.
Yeah, and to be fair, there is that 0.1% of the time where it doesn't. So we talked about, Quicksin scores, right? And so that ability in background noise gives you a dB SNR loss score, which tells you how loud you need somebody's voice to be above the noise in order to hear them well. This score can be severe enough to where those devices still don't help all of the way. And I can think of one patient in particular right now that I'm working with that still is using the assistive listening devices, and the dining hall in his retirement community is so absurdly loud and has such poor acoustics that he still struggles, and we have everything optimized to the best it possibly can be at this point, and he will still continue to struggle. So, but that's the thing though, is that he also recognizes that assistive listening device that he has, he can go to even a slightly less noisy area of this dining hall, or even to the patio where there's still other chatter, but he can now also still have a conversation. It's a struggle, but he's not, isolated by himself anymore. And so that has been, at least the icing on the cake, where, it's not as perfect as he would like it to be. It's not as perfect as I would like it to be, as I am also but it is significantly better where he's, not just alone in a room with a lot of people.
And I think it's important for people to understand that as long as you're doing everything that you can possibly do to hear better, and you realize like this is the best that it can get, a lot of people are actually more satisfied with that outcome, because I think a lot of people who wear hearing aids, even with all these digital features that we have available to us, even if everything's optimized, but they don't know that everything's been optimized in the right way, they still always question like, could I hear better? And that's why doing outcome measures and things like that is so important for patients, so they understand like I am literally at the highest level I can possibly be. All right guys, if you want to check out the full episode, I will have it linked in the description.